Happy Monday, everybody. It is a beautiful Monday here in Baltimore. It's kind of hot, actually. Got to cut the air on for kind of the first time. It's like 70-something degrees right now. Pretty nice. So I'm a little hot. I'm going to leave the window. I want to open up the window, but there's a lot of people playing outside and enjoying the outside. So I'm going to leave it closed so that there's not too much noise. Let's see here. Just getting set up. So tonight's part 2 of the JavaScript stuff that we're going to be doing. We started last week working on the JavaScripting workshopper, and so this is, this is a product or a program through nodeschool.io. I'll paste this in the chat. This is where you can grab it from. This is what we're going over. They have a bunch of workshoppers here. Let's view the workshopper list. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, big extra large. So this is their core, their core set of workshoppers. So we started out with the JavaScripting one last week, and we did the first half, I believe, and we're gonna finish those out tonight. And maybe one day we'll go over the Learn You Node one as well, and maybe the Get It one too. That's pretty cool. I've actually never tried this one, but the goal of this is to, so usually on Mondays, we're going through something called the Crucible. There's a website called Exorcism, which is a coding exercise website, and we're trying to go through and complete every single challenge on that website. I think for the Golang language, there's something like 104 problems. I think for JavaScript, there's like 96. So we're probably going to go through and complete about 100 of those problems, in the coming weeks. We've only gotten through about 5, so I want to give people a chance to, who were lost while we were doing it. I had some people reach out to me saying, hey, I'm very interested in this. I kind of want to catch up, figure out what you guys are doing. We're going through this just to kind of give everyone kind of a base level set of expectations and knowledge on programming. Hopefully people, get through this and can just feel more comfortable, looking and working through the logic of things. Because that's mostly what we're going to be doing. Don't worry about the syntax. Don't worry about, remembering each and every little semicolon and things like that. Worry about the ideas that we're talking about. Worry about, pay attention to the way we're going to solve these problems. But yeah, so what do we have left for the evening? So tonight I'm going to do this actually in Visual Studio Code and not in, I did it in Vim last time. That was loud. I need to cut that off. Where were we last time? Mastermind. Yeah, let's go to JavaScripting. Alright, make this a little smaller, no feedback, cancel that little pop-up. This looks pretty good. Let me get the music going, it's a little quiet. Cool. Alright, so last time we went through a lot of different things. We went through... in here, I think I can spin up the terminal and it's gonna bash. Let's see if that's gonna be clear. All right, that's pretty clear. What happens if I go below this? Maybe not. Let's open up a terminal for this. Make this a bit larger so you can see. I need to just put in a little quick alias or a little quick script to change this for me. Let's make it 28. All right. That seems mostly viewable. So, coming JavaScripting here is just so we know where we're at. So yeah, so last time we went through, we did the introduction to the JavaScripting workshopper, and then we went through some concepts that apply again to every language, or almost all languages. Went through variables, went through strings, variables being little representations and pointers of things that can change. The word variable means that it can change. So these are just representations of values that you can modify throughout your code. Strings, which is just kind of a list or a string of characters. String length, this is being able to find, how many characters are in a string. Revising strings, so being able to, modify strings after you've already made them. Numbers, so that's self-explanatory. Numbers, talked about both integers and floats being decibels, integers being whole numbers, so a little trip back to math class there. Rounding numbers, so just teaching us how to round numbers up and down. And converting a number to a string. So last time we talked about types. We talked about types and how types are important. And this was converting numbers into strings. And if statements. So this is where we introduce some conditionals and some logic into our code. Basically, we were saying, you say if this thing that I give it is true or false. So if the thing I give it evaluates to true, run this set of code or run this piece of code, and maybe if it's not, do something else. So it's just adding in some logic to our code. Then we added in a for loop. So for loop, loops period allow you to be able to run a piece of code at any number of times. So you write a piece of code once and you use that logic and you repeat this code until the parameters that you set are no longer true. And so we'll see a little bit more of that throughout this process, but loops are pretty important. We do loops almost in all of the coding problems that we do here to solve them. So those are pretty important. So if you're going through this, make sure you understand loops. And tonight we're going to get into arrays. So arrays are a pretty important thing. Let's go ahead and go into this workshopper and let's see what it's saying here. Let's expand this out a little bit. Cool. So an array, exercise 11 and 19, an array is a list of values. Pretty simple. Couldn't get any more simple than that. It's a list of values, and here's an example. So we learned about variables. This is how you instantiate a variable. We're saying var pets, setting up a variable named pets, is equal to the list of cat, dog, and rat. So the challenge. We just that fast. We've kind of learned all about arrays. That's great. And now we can do the challenge really quick. I'm sure I'm assuming they're going to have more information about arrays after this, but we'll kind of follow them as is. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So let's read what it wants us to do. It wants us to create a file named array.js. So let's start right there. Where is my thing? Let's create a new file here. So last time you saw me using Vim. So if you want to learn how to use Vim a little bit, go back and watch the last one. This time I'm going to use VS Code since I think it's a little more accessible. And I think people will be able to get moving with this a little bit faster, download it and get going with it. So I just clicked the little button here for a new file, and I'm going to call it arrays.js, just like they want. Cool. So in that file, we're going to define a variable named pizza toppings that references, actually, let's do this. Let's copy here so we don't forget. In that file, define a variable, we know how to do that, named pizza toppings that references an array that contains 3 strings in this order: tomato, sauce, cheese, and pepperoni. Just so we don't forget, I'm going to paste this here and I'll make it a comment. I definitely did that in the worst way possible because I'm used to using Vim, but I definitely could have done that faster. So let's close this so we have a little more space. And we want a variable. So last time, so you're supposed to use var. I told you to use var. We're going to use let, the let keyword, let and const, and these are the let in particular is kind of the new way to do things. I'll explain more later as we're going through coding challenges and stuff why this is the case. Var still works, but we're going to be using let for the duration of these videos. And I actually think we'll learn about that later in scope. So we want a variable and we want to call it pizza toppings because that's what they told us to do. and it's going to reference an array that contains 3 strings in this order. Now, we know how to write a string. I told you a string, whenever you see some characters or some words inside of quotes, whenever you see quotes, single quotes or double quotes, you should be thinking string. So we know how to make strings. So let's do that first. So let's just make a list of strings. I'll single quote them. It says in this order. So let's go tomato, and let's go sauce, and what do we got? Cheese, and I spelled that wrong. And we've got pepperoni. All right. So they got some underlines here because I've done something wrong, but I just wanted to get the strings in place. Oh, actually, I read that completely wrong. There's only 3 strings, and tomato sauce is 1 word. So let's go ahead and put those together. Cool. So 3 strings there. Remember, spaces are valid characters in a string, so you don't need to worry about that. But let's take a look back at what we had here and kind of take a look at it. Once an array, so remember how I told you strings can be denoted with the quotes. Arrays are denoted with these brackets here. So we will go ahead and apply those brackets, and it looks like each item is separated with a comma. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead, I'll highlight this, the little bracket. Whoops, wrong bracket. Let's do the right bracket. Cool, so now we got some brackets around them, and let's just go ahead and throw some commas in between here. And awesome, the lines go away. It looks like we've made our array. This looks like what they wanted, but let's take a look and read it again. All right, so we did that part. Use console.log to print the pizza toppings array to the terminal. So we learned how to do that in the last one. So let's just use that. Cool. So let's use console.log. Console.log is how you print things out to the console or to the terminal. If you're going to run it in here with Node, like I am, and we're going to print out pizza toppings. And we're going to save this. And let's go ahead and run it on our own first. So let's Control C this, and got our files here. And so to run it, if you have Node installed, Node.js installed, we're going to do Node arrays.js. And just like that, it prints out the array that we made. Exactly the same, no differences. So that's good there. So now let's run JavaScripting verify arrays.js. So this is how we verify the work that we have is proper in this workshop. So let's go ahead and do that. Read what it says. And it says, yay, pizza array. You've successfully done this. So just like that, we created our first array, and we were able to verify that and do what they want us to do. So good job to us. So let's go in and let's go and see what we got left. All right, accessing array. Oh, array filtering is next. So we did arrays. Let's do array filtering. So, let's go back up. So this lets us know there are many ways to manipulate arrays. One common task is filtering arrays to only certain values. For this, we can use the .filter method, and they give us an example here. And so you can see here, it's got a variable, an array name of pets, and inside of that array, inside of that list, is cat, dog, and elephant. And then they're going to go down here and make a new variable called filtered. And then we're gonna do something we haven't actually we've done these methods before. We've done dot methods before. So we got filtered here, and it's equals pets dot filter. So that's gonna run the filter method on pets, and this is the way you have to write it. And what it's going to do, it's going to run this function, and it's going to return any pet that is not equal to elephant. So we talked about equality operations a little bit last time. And so the exclamation point here means not equal. So anything that's not elephant should return. So it sounds like the filter variable should now only contain cat and dog. So they gave us that example. They gave us, again, we want to learn the logic. So down here, let's copy all of this. Let's copy this. let's go ahead and paste it in our file. Actually, we need to make a file first. What do they say the file need to be called? Oh, it says it right there. So it was array-filtering.js, I believe. Yep. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and make our new file. Call it array-filtering.js. All right, let's close this terminal for now. And let's paste in all of the stuff here so that we have it here to reference. And then, a neat trick, if you are using Visual Studio Code like I am, you can, anything you want to turn into a comment, even if you don't know the characters to comment in that language, you can highlight everything or highlight that line that you want, and you can hit Control slash, so the slash that's next to the shift. I never know which one's forward slash and backslash. I think this is a forward slash. Pretty sure it's a forward slash. But you can use that forward slash, Control forward slash, and it will comment out everything. So, and again, if you don't remember, comments are a way to be able to put text into your code without your interpreter or your compiler reading it. So, yeah, this code will be ignored by the interpreter. So I just have it here for me to read. So we made the file. In that file, we're going to create a variable named numbers that references this array. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this array because you shouldn't do extra work. And again, we're going to use let instead of var. So you could also use var, but we're going to use let. We're going to call it numbers, and it's going to end up being a list of numbers. So, yeah, this array, this list of things consists of 10 numbers. Remember how these don't have any quotes on them. That's how you know they're numbers. If we put quotes around them, they will become strings, and they would change colors to visually help you understand that that they're actually different things. But cool. So we have an array of numbers here. And then, so like the above, define a variable named filtered that references the numbers filter. And the function that you pass to the .filter method will look something like this. So it looks like they're giving us everything we need. So we're going to define another variable, as it says, named filtered. And it's going to reference numbers.filter. And this filter expression takes a function. So we're going to pass this in. Let me see if that's going to format properly. No, not really. Let's see if we can copy and paste. Actually, it looks very similar. It just takes more stuff. Cool. So we'll do that. Maybe I can. That looks good. That looks fine. I will do this. I'll do this. This should work. And then what does it want us to do? Then it wants to console.log the filter stuff. So let's do that, and then we'll talk about what's actually happening here. I know this is a lot of different stuff here, but we'll talk about it afterwards. So let's get the output, and let's see if we can work backwards to understand what went on here. So we're on console.log filtered. We're going to do that, and let's go ahead and run it and see if it runs. Array filtering.js failed. Number is not defined. So give us an error really quick. Number. Oh, that's why. So you can see here, I tried to run this method on something that doesn't exist. So I called it number here, but it says numbers here. And it tells us up here we're supposed to make the variable numbers. So let's go ahead and save that. Cool. All right, so what did it spit back to us? It spit back to us 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. What does that mean? I just looked at the chat. Oh yeah. We did you give me the one last time? The filter on the I don't know. We did a filter on something we were doing on exorcism. And someone gave me a very similar map one. But so what happened here is basically we got 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Let's take a look at the code and figure out why we got that. So originally we had all these numbers, but the function that array in here was to return any number. Remember we talked about we did a whole stream on arithmetic operators, and this is numbers modulus 2. So this what modulo is going to do is going to divide by this number. So it's going to divide number by 2. And it's going to do this for each of the things in here. And it's going to check if the remainder is equal to 0. So if the remainder is equal to 0, this will give you all of the even numbers in the group. So 2, divided by 2 equals 0. 3 divided by 2, the remainder is 1. So number modulo 2, if the number was 3, would equal 1. And so that number wouldn't end up in the filtered variable. And so that's what this filter function is going to do. It runs this function against all these numbers, runs this comparison against all of them, and spits out what matches. And again, so we got all of the even numbers here. And so we can go JavaScripting verify. What do we call that? Array-filtering. Let's see if that's right. Cool. We definitely got it right. We got 7 challenges left. We're gonna get through them pretty quick tonight. I got some cool stuff I'm working on. I got a platform I'm trying to release for all of this stuff, and I got to work on a lot of that tonight because I'm a busy guy. So we're gonna get through these last 7 pretty quick. Even though this is the most, I guess, logic dense piece of the workshopper, I think we can get through it pretty quickly. So go on to the next one. Accessing array values. So this is where I didn't want to go ahead. I didn't want to jump too far ahead. I wanted them to kind of let us know what we will be doing here. Oh yeah, I don't want to do this in here. Let's do this in the full terminal. All right, accessing array values. So array element, the above code. Wait, let me see here. Okay, let's go to the top of this. All right, array elements can be accessed through an index number. We'll talk about that in a second. Index number starts from 0 to an array's property length minus 1. Now that's confusing. This is your first time hearing that. It's very confusing. These arrays, they are indexed, and so what you can do is you can access the items at the index's value. So it's a 0. Arrays are of 0 index. They start with 0, and they go up from there. So the first item in an array is 0. Its index is 0. The next item's index is 1. Next item's index is 2, and so on. So the reason this says an index number starts from 0 to an array's property length minus 1 is because we learned about length before. So the same way that we do the dot length to find out how many characters are in an array, we can do the same thing. We can do something very similar or same thing to find out how many items are in an array. So, the length of this array would end up being 3. Yeah, and then so, index number starts from 0 to an array's property length minus 1. So this would go from 0 to 2 because there are only 3 items in here starting at 0. So it would only go from 0 to 2, which is the length. The length is 3, minus 1 is 2. And so that's what they mean by that. So they give us an example here, and we've got the same, the same array of pets here. And then we're printing out console.log that prints out to the screen or to the console pets of 0. So this is how you pass in that index. So the variable name is pets, same thing here, and we're going to call the 0 the thing at the 0 index. And it lets you know here that should just give us cat because cat is the first thing in this array. Cool. So array elements must be accessed only using bracket notation. Dot notation is invalid. So in some languages, there are things other than languages. I don't know what I would call something like JSON or other. There are other ways to be able to access these elements. Some languages offer you dot notation to access it, so you could do a .0 rather than this brackets. But valid notation in JavaScript, because we're doing it in JavaScript, is just this bracket notation. So if you're using a different language, you should look into it and see if you can use that dot notation. So what's the challenge here? We're gonna create a file. This looks pretty small. Let's copy this. Let's go in here. Actually, I keep doing that. We need to read the name of the file first. Accessing arrayvalues.js. So let's make that first. Arrayvalues.js. Cool. Let's close this. Paste this in. Again, let's comment everything out. All right, we got our file. Let's close this so we can see a little more. And let's read what it has to say. In that file, define an array of food. So I'm going to use let again and not var. And let's copy this. This is the array they want. All right. And then what they want us to do with this is they want us to use console.log to print the second value of array to the terminal. Now you can read that a few different ways. If this is the first time I was reading it, that might confuse me. But when they say the second value, I'm pretty sure they want the actual second value and not the value in the in the second index, the index spot of 2. They say second value. I think second is the key word, and using second instead of giving the number 2. And so this is the first value of apple. The second value is pizza. So we're going to try to print that out. So let's do console.log. And in here, we're going to call our array. And then the index we want, again, if this is the one we want, the second one, the index of this is 0. So the index of this is actually 1 and not 2. So let's go ahead and try that and see if we get the desired effect here. So we're going to go to JavaScripting. Actually, JavaScripting, verify, accessing. There we go. All right, so we got that right. Pretty simple. We were able to access that pretty easily, but we could do a little more. Actually, we should have ran that first node. So you can see it gave us pizza down here. The output gave us pizza when we did 2. We did 1. If we want to get the last item in here, we could do this, and this will give us pair. You can see how it gives us a different output. But what happens if we give it something that's not there? So let's just go up 1 to 3. So there are 3 items here, but it starts at 0. So it only goes up to 0 to 2. Nothing in the third spot. Let's see what happens when we run this. Cool, gives us undefined, and that's because there's nothing in the third index, so it comes back to you as undefined. Other languages will give you, you may get an out of bounds error. The program will fail completely. Some other languages fail kind of gracefully like this. Whether or not it's a good thing depends on your use case, and that's why languages are opinionated and why people have strong feelings about them because of the way they handle stuff like this. Cool. So let's put this back to, we already verified this. So I'll just leave it back to where it was. We'll save it and we'll move on to the next one. And now looping through arrays. So now we're starting to combine some of the things that we've learned here. So let's go here. Where does this start? All right. For this challenge, we will use a for loop that we learned earlier or last time to manipulate a list of values in an array. So again, arrays have lots of things in them, or can have lots of things in them. We said that loops allow you to write a piece of code that happens over and over again, and so you can, you can run the same piece of code over and over again. And it sounds like we want to do that to each of the items inside of this array. So accessing array values can be done using an integer. We learned about integer. Those are numbers. Each item in an array is identified by a number starting at 0. We just learned that. So in this array, high is identified by the number 1. So this is the second item in this array, identified by the number 1. It can be accessed like this: greetings, number 1. Cool. Bracket notation. We just learned that. So inside a for loop, we would use the I variable. So we're going to make a variable called I, and we are going to, inside the square brackets, instead of directly using the integer. So instead of 1 here, we're going to end up using the I there. We're going to show you how that works. So we're going to create a file named loopingthrougharrays.js, and then I'll copy this so that we can read it in our file. Let's make a new file. Looping through arrays, and let's paste. Make everything a comment. All right. So in here, we're going to find this variable that references the array. Sorry, my dog is barking at people outside. So So we're going to go with let. What are we going to call this? Name pets. And it is going to reference these things. Again, I'm going to copy and paste because you should be lazy. And I didn't feel like typing that. So we're going to, we got that here. We're going to create a loop that changes each string in the array so that they are plural. So making something plural, we're going to add an S to everything. And so we'll use a statement like this inside of our for loop. So it's very interesting. So they give us, they kind of give it to us. But again, we have to set up our for loop because we learned it before. They don't give us that. So cool. For loop starts with the word for, and then you've got to give it some parameters. So for loops take three different things. You set up a variable first, and then you separate that, and then you set up your conditional. So you set up a variable, and so let's do that first. So we said we were going to use I, so we're going to use var I, and we're going to set that equal to 0. You can set it to whatever you want to set it to. In this case, and in a lot of cases, you're going to want to set it to 0. Once we have it set to 0, we now need to add in our conditional statement. So this is the statement that's going to be evaluated every time this runs, and it's only going to run. This for loop is only going to run if this conditional is true. So so let's do what's our conditional. Actually, let's do our conditional next. So we basically want to run this for every item in here. And so we want this to run for each item. There are 3 items in here. So but we also know that the value of this is the length minus 1. So we want this to run 3 times. So we're gonna say while I is less than pets.length. So while I is less than this, so pets.length, we'll use that .length function to check how many items are in here. And so while I is less than that length, we're going to run this bit of code. And then the last thing you're going to put it in here is what happens at the end of each run of that loop. So again, for loop, 3 pieces. First, set up a variable. Usually this is going to be your iterator. The next thing is the conditional statement that is evaluated before this runs to make sure it should run. And then this is a piece that you do that does something at the very end of the run. So we've got that set up. So we've got our for loop here. And then they give us the code here, and I'll explain what this is doing to you. So what we have here, so we already talked about, this should look familiar to you. This is how you access, an item in an array. And in here, they're using I instead of a number that we're used to. But this I, because it's a variable, it's representing the value of a number. So the first time this for loop runs, we're setting up I. It'll be 0 the very first time. So this I will basically get replaced with the value of 0. So while pets 0, so that's this one, is now, we're saying it's now equal to pets 0, which is still cat plus the string s. So you can add strings together in JavaScript the same way you can add numbers. And actually we did an example of that, but it'll basically just concatenate those and it'll put them together. And so it'll add this s to cat. And then once it runs once, this I++ will add 1 to this number. This is a shorthand to be able to add 1 to something. Minus will subtract it. And basically this will turn into 1. So when this runs again, this will be 1. When it runs again, it'll be 2. And you can see how it'll just go down the line and access different things. And so that should be all we need to do. And then it wants us to console.log what the new array is. So pets, and let's save that, and let's go ahead and run it. What do we call this file? Looping. Cool. And so just like that, we started with cat, dog, and rats, and we ended up with, we started out with cat, dog, and rat, and we ended up with cat, dog, and rats. We made them all plural, just like they wanted. So let's do JavaScripting, verify, looping through arrays.js, and we've got 5 left. So good job there. So let's go JavaScripting again. Actually, don't want to do it here. Keep forgetting. Let's scroll down. Now we're into objects. So objects are really important in JavaScript. I don't know if you've ever heard of object-oriented programming, but objects are very important, and it's a great way for you to be able to. It's a great paradigm for programming. It allows you to do a lot of things. So, objects are lists of values similar to arrays, except values are identified by keys instead of integers. So, what does this mean? This means that, and here's an example, this means that the same way, so you're going to see that these are now curly braces instead of the brackets that you might be used to now. But inside of here, it's basically a bunch of key value pairs. So instead of having a variable named pizza, we have this key of pizza, and the value of that key is yum. And for salad, we have a key of salad, and we have a value of gross. So objects, again, they're kind of this key value pair list of key value pairs. Could be one, but it's usually a list of key value pairs that you can access and manipulate. So let's do this. So we're going to create a file named object.js, and then we're going to run whatever this says. Paste that in. Again, let's remember control / or backslash, control /, the same slash that you will put into your browser. This one, pretty sure / though. So in here, we're going to define a variable. So let pizza, actually, let's copy and paste again. We're going to change that var keyword into let. And I'm going to uncomment these lines. That same control / also uncomments if you want to uncomment your stuff. So cool. So we have this object that we've created here. So we have a variable named pizza. The object's name is pizza. And then these key value pairs, it's important to know that these keys can have values of just about anything. So you can see here we've given this a value of an array. Here we've given this a value that is a string, and here we've given it a value of a number. All of these are things that we just learned. So, so with this, what do they want us to do? Just to print this object to the terminal. So let's go ahead and do that. Save that, and let's see what happens here. What is this file called? Actually, let's run it first. Node object.js. All right, so this basically prints out exactly what we've put into it. You can see it's still in the curly braces, just as we've typed it. It prints out the object exactly as is. So let's verify that. Make sure we've learned everything we need to learn for this piece. All right, just that fast. We've only got 4 challenges left. We did pretty good there. Let's go ahead and run JavaScripting again. Object properties. This is, so we just learned about objects. Objects are important, but object properties are more important. I mean, it's part of the same thing, but this is where it gets cool. So you can access and manipulate object properties, which are the keys and values of that object that object contains, using a method very similar to arrays. So here's an example. We've got this variable example with the key of pizza and the value of yummy. And then it looks like they've console.logged example square brackets pizza. And so you can see how we're basically substituting that index value that we learned before into actually using the key here instead. So above code will print out the string yummy to the terminal. Alternatively, you can use dot notation to get identical results. So we talked about before how you couldn't use dot notation to be able to get things out of arrays, but you can absolutely use dot notation to get things outside of objects. And so instead of doing this, we can do example.pizza. So these are equivalent lines, and they both will return the value yummy. So what's our challenge here? So we want to create a file called objectproperties.js. Let's copy. Let's close some of these. Let's close all these actually. Start a new file. Objectproperties.js. All right. So in this file, we're going to find a variable named food like this. So again, let's copy and paste. They've done all the hard work for us. And again, we're going to change var to let, so we can get comfortable using the let operator. Hey, how you doing, Viable Clan member? Welcome back to the stream. So we've got our object here for the food, and what do we want to do with that? We want a console dialog to print out the types property of the food object to the terminal. Cool. So we just learned that we can do that in two different ways, and I'll show you that they both work. So we'll do them both ways first. The first time we'll do food, and then we'll use the notation that we're used to from the arrays that we were just doing, and we'll do types. I think do we have to do that? Do we have to put it in quotes? Don't remember. Yeah, put it in quotes. And then we'll also do it this way. Food.types. So these should be equivalent, as they stated before. So this basically should print out only pizza 2 times in a row. Yeah, I am actually recording this for later too. Tonight I'm actually planning on actually uploading all the stuff that I've recorded. I've recorded all the live streams since I started. So I will be, this one is absolutely being recorded. So you can kind of go back and catch up on this too if you need to. So let's do, what do we call this one? Object properties. Spell that wrong. Oops, I didn't mean to verify. I wanted to node. We ran it, so cool. It printed out twice, and it's exactly the same. And that is just to show you that both of these are the same. You could use either one of these, whichever one you're more comfortable with. I like to use this one, the dot notation. Most people I know or I've seen use the dot notation as well. So I would recommend using that, but use whichever one you're comfortable with. Run it again. Now it's only one there. And if we do another JavaScripting verify, cool. And now we're down to the final 3 challenges. So we've come a long way here. So we learned how to access, we've learned about arrays, looping through arrays. We've learned about objects and object properties and how to access those object properties. So let's go on to let's get through these last 3 pretty quickly. So now we've got functions. Now you've seen me do functions on here a bunch of times already if you've been watching the Crucible stuff. And so where does this start? Cool. So a function is a block of code that takes input, processes that input, and then produces output. They probably should word that differently. It does not have to take input. Functions definitely don't need to take input, but they can take input. They do some processing and they produce output. Really, they also don't need to do any processing. They can just do some output. And the example here that they have here actually, well, it does some processing and output in the same line. But here's an example. So a function, again, is we talked about a for loop being a repeatable piece of code, something that repeats your code. A function is something that is a reusable piece of code. So you basically write a piece of code once, and writing it in the form of a function allows you to call it any number of times that you'd like. So this is how you code. You write these functions that can be called in different places that that are that's kind of a concise piece of code that does something that you can use later. So here's an example. They've created this function. The function's name is example. And so in here they said it takes input. So what this is here. So basically anything in the parentheses is going to be the input. So this says it takes a variable of X, and then it does some processing. So every function to get something out of it needs a return. And so it's basically going to take an X and it's going to return x times 2. So this is multiplication. And so you're going to pass in, let's say I pass in x, is just a variable. So if I pass in 10 to this, it's going to return 10 times 2. So it's going to return 20 to me. And it says we can call a function like this to get the number 10. So this is how you call it. And so you can see how this is kind of the same as this. We can call the function name with the parentheses, and you put in whatever you want to pass as your input in here. And basically this gets evaluated as x and passed in as x and multiplied here. So basically when this gets passed in here, it multiplies it by 2 and you get 10 out of it. So the challenge, functions, we need to create a file called functions.js. Let's do that. And then we got some stuff to do in there. Functions.js. Let's paste here. Let's do that. Close this. All right. In this file, we want to define a function named eat. So let's start with that. And so the cool thing about Visual Studio Code, this is where Visual Studio Code gets cool, or any kind of text editor gets cool. It'll do some of the stuff. It'll fill in a lot of the stuff for you. So it knows the format of a function. So I have this here, a function statement, and it's going to autofill that for me. And so I can just, if I ever forget the syntax for this, I can go ahead and use that. So the name is going to be, it wants to be called eat. And it's going to take an argument named food. So our parameter, our argument is going to be food here, not food. Cool. And then we want to return food, taste it really good. So in the last example, we learned that we can concatenate strings together, we can add strings together, and it will stick them together. And so basically, whatever we pass in for food, it's going to get passed in down here, and then taste it really good is going to get added to it. So inside the parentheses of console.log, call the eat function with the string bananas as the argument. Cool. So we know how to do console.log. And to call a function, again, it's going to be eat with the parentheses. So that's how you call a function, period. Anytime you see a word with parentheses after open, close like this, that's basically calling a function. Whoops. And what you can do is, oh, my battery's getting low on my headphones. 1 second. Got it. I saved it.
Charging battery.
That works. So, so that's how you do it, and then you pass in your food parameter into the parentheses here. So they said they want us to pass in bananas, but we could do anything, and I'll show you that. But to solve this, we want to do bananas. So let's go ahead and run that. So we're going to do node, and we call this functions.js, and that failed. So let's see why it failed. It says bananas is not defined. Pretty simple here. And what happens is they're very, you got to pay attention to the words that are given to you. So it says call the eat function with the string bananas passed in as an argument. So I passed in bananas. As it is, it's looking for a variable named bananas. But if I give it, whoops, there we go. If I make it a string like this should work. And we run it, and it says bananas taste it really good. And so you can kind of understand how these parameters work, how this is just, all this is a variable. This is a placeholder. This text could actually be anything, but they want us to have it as food. But you can pass in literally anything in here, and you run it again, and it will pass it in properly. And so that's why functions are cool. That's how you can use it to do all kinds of stuff. You can use it to, call code and be able to apply it to a lot of different things. Functions are great to use with loops as well. So it's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and go back to bananas here, and let's go and verify that. All right, got through that pretty fast. So again, we have seen functions already. We had done those to solve just about every single one of the items that we've done so far on exorcism. So we've got 2 left. What do we got? Let's do it in here. All right, now we have function arguments and scope. Let's go with this. Function argument. So a function can be declared to receive any number of arguments. Arguments can be from any type. So types, again, we talked about things like numbers, both integers and floats. We talked about strings. They can be arrays. So you have a lot of options here. They can be of any type. And here's an example. So we already just saw a function before, but before we saw it with a single parameter of x. It shows us here that with a comma, we can pass in any number of arguments that we'd like. So any number of parameters here can be input. And so this function example now takes two things. It takes a first argument and a second argument, and then right here, it will print those out. So we can call that function with two arguments like this. So the same way we just do we call the function and then put the parentheses after it. We just pass in the same paradigm. We pass in the first argument and pass in the second argument. So this is basically the same thing we just did, but being able to pass in more arguments. So we want to create a file named arguments.js. Function arguments.js. So let's do that first. And we're going to click here and we're going to go function arguments.js. The name of the file doesn't really matter actually. But I'm just doing what they say here. So let's paste this here just so we can read off of it, so we can refer to it. Let's do that. And then what we want to do is create a function named math that takes 3 arguments. So function, remember you can use VS Code to do this if you like, or I can type it out. So I'll do function, and we'll call it math. And it's going to take 3 arguments. It's really important for you to understand that argument names are only used to reference them. This is a very important line. The names of them don't matter. So I could do something like X, comma, Y, comma, Z to reference them, or I could do 1 and 2 and then I could skip over to 10 if I like. These are just placeholders. It doesn't matter what these are. So I'm just gonna call them X, Y. I'm gonna call them X, Y, and Z, just so I don't have to type that much. And our function is now set up. So we have a function called math, and it takes 3 different arguments. So we named them as we'd like. So within the math function, return the value obtained from multiplying the second and third arguments. So we saw that to get a value back from a function, you have to do return. So let's just start with let's take it as is given to us. So let's multiply the second and third argument. So the second argument is Y, so we do Y, and the third argument is Z, and so we're gonna multiply that by Z. Whoops. Multiply that by Z. So that's how we multiply the second and third arguments, and adding that result to the first argument. So then we can add that result to the first argument. Now, in almost all programming languages, I think all of them as well, order of operations matters here. So if you remember Pemdas, it's pretty important. Here, I don't need to do anything special because we know that multiplication comes before addition. So PEMDAS, what is that? Parentheses first, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. But remember, the multiplication division part is not multiplication and then division. It is multiplication or division in order from left to right. A lot of people forget that and they multiply before they divide. That's not the case. It is either one in order from left to right. They are equals in this, as are addition and subtraction. This is how I can do this. Now, if you wanted to redo it, you could use parentheses again to make this better, and you could do X and add that to the value of these. Actually, this will still work. Doesn't really matter. But if you want to ensure something happens, you can do this. But again, because of the order operations, it will do these. It will do this multiplication before it does this addition. So we'll just do it as it reads in case you're following along, and we'll add X to it. Cool. So after that, inside the parentheses of console.log, call the math function with the numbers 53. 61 and 67. So let's do that. And now you can see how you could easily make a calculator application, or at least the logic for a calculator application, by just, making functions that take in, any number of parameters, and doing it that way. But so console.log, we'll call the math function here, just like that. We'll pass in 53 as the first one. We'll pass in 61 as the second one, and 67 as the third. And we'll go ahead and save that, and let's try to run it. Node, function, arguments.js, and we get the number 41,440. And so let's open up a calculator and make sure that is right. So what were our numbers here? Our numbers were 61 times 67. So let's go 61 times 67 equals, and then we're going to add to that the number 53, and we've got 4,140. So we got the same thing. So we can see here we've done a little math here, and we use it to be lazy. So let's JavaScript verify this. And awesome. Now we've only got one single challenge left. So let's get through that. If we can get through it in 2 minutes, that'll be right on the dot an hour. So scope is pretty important, so we probably won't get through this in 2 minutes. This is something very important to know, and that's why this section is so long. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about the amount of code. Understand, as we're going through this, definitely take in the concept of scope. Scope applies to every programming language. Scope applies a little differently in every programming language, but scope does matter in every programming language, and it is very important to know. So, scope is the set of variables, objects, and functions that you have access to. So JavaScript has two scopes, global, so global being everything, and local, so local to where you are. So a variable that is declared outside of a function definition is a global variable. So a function definition would be exactly what we just did by declaring this function here. So if we declared a variable inside of this function, it would only be accessible inside of this function. But if we declared it outside of a function, it is a global variable and it can be accessed anywhere. And that is a very important concept to know. So it's a global variable, and its value is accessible and modifiable throughout your program if it's global. A variable that is declared inside of a function is local. So it is created and destroyed every time the function is executed, and it cannot be accessed by any code outside the function. So you can see why that would be very important. One, because it's created, something that's created every time a function's run. If you have something you're trying to manipulate, like if you're writing your calculator app and you wanted to keep track of the total, you may want that inside, you may not want that inside, depending on what you're trying to do. But yeah, so functions defined inside of other functions, known as nested functions, have access to their parent's function scope. So that's very confusing. So we have a function here, and you can nest functions inside of other functions. So I could do this, and I could set up a new function, and I could call it something else. I could call it test. And if I made a variable up here, I'll do it before the return, so it's not weird. So if I did let, let's call that variable, I don't know, Aaron equals test. This function that's nested underneath would have access. This function would have access to this variable. But if I also made a variable here and said let, my last name is Brooks, and I also made it the value of test, this Brooks variable would not be available from its parent function. It kind of just only goes downwards, which is kind of confusing. So this is an example here we'll go over, and hopefully it'll start to make a little more sense. So in the example here, pay attention to the comments in the code below. So we've set up a variable of a, and we set it equal to the value 4, and then we set up a function here called foo, and then we set up another variable here. So this right here, this is a global variable. This right here, because it's in a function, this is a local variable, and it is local to this function. And it says here, B cannot be accessed outside of this foo function, but can be accessed by functions defined inside of foo. So this is foo. There are functions like this that are defined inside. So this variable is only accessible by foo and by this function bar. And then in the function bar, we set up a new variable here of B equal to 2. And so this, what happens here is another B variable is created inside the function scope. This changes the new B variable, but doesn't affect the old one. So it'll set up a B, the variable B here that's only accessible here, and it doesn't affect the one that is out here because it's locally scoped to this one. And when you print it out, you'll get all this stuff. And so yeah, this is just a way to kind of show you how it works. So let's go ahead and read what they want us to do here. So we're going to create a file named scope.js. We're going to copy the following code. So I'll go ahead and just copy this code now, and then we'll read what to do with it after. I don't want too many words on the screen. All right, so we've got this in here. And actually, you won't be able to see this, but I'll move this side by side. It'll probably be blocked behind my picture, but you don't need to worry about that. Let's do this right here, just so we can read it. And then so we want to use our knowledge of variables, scope, a variable scope, and place the following code inside one of the functions in scope.js. So the output is A equals 1, B equals 8, and C equals 6. So it's basically telling us to stick this bit of code inside of one of these function blocks to make sure that we get the values that they said. So let's figure that out. So let's just go down the line. So when the global variable here, when the program starts, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. That does not match to this right here. It doesn't match this over here, so, but variable A is 1, that does match. So let's drop down into here and see what they would be. So first function, it only specifies a variable B and C here. So A is still 1, B is now 5, and C is 6. So right now we've got C being proper and A being proper, but not B, because B is 5 and not 8. So we drop down 1 below here, and we get A. Because A isn't defined here, it can go upwards and have access to this variable. A here is going to be 1, B here is going to be 8, and C here is going to drop down, and it's going to first grab this, then it's going to grab this, and C is going to be 6. So I think this is where we want to put it, but let's take a look here at these next two. So we'll put it here just so we remember. Put that here, but then we'll check here. So if we drop all the way down to here, A is now 7, which is already wrong because we want A to be 1. But here B is 8 because it goes up to here and grabs this, and C is 9. So that's wrong. And then in the last function, A is 1, so that matches. B is actually 8 because it falls down from here. Because there's no B defined here or here. So A is 1, B is 8, so that's right. But C is 8 and not 6. So I think this is where we would want to go. And so this is a weird way to, it's a perfect way to talk about scope, but it's a little daunting to read and to look at and kind of follow what's happening. So if we go node, scope.js, it prints out what we want here. But we can see how if we move this code around, we'll get different values. So excellent. And so you can see how this gets different values because of the scope of each of the variables and what their value is as you check out their scope and see what they have access to. So scope is really important, and it is the cause of problems in a lot of situations. You know, it's just a scoping problem. You think you're doing things right, you're not getting the right output that you're expecting. It's probably a scoping issue. And I think that, so let's verify it first. So let's put this back to where it was. Let's save it. Let's run another JavaScripting verify scope. And just like that, we finished all of the challenges. So in 2 weeks, we finished up all the basics of JavaScript. These will all be on YouTube. If you don't know my YouTube, you can just do, I'll just do it here. That should do it. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll be posting all of these up on YouTube so that you can follow along and catch up to the things that you've missed. But so next Monday, we'll be right back out into the Crucible, and we'll hop back into some more of these coding challenges. Hopefully this is giving you either a refresher or giving you the knowledge and the experience kind of to be able to at least follow along and kind of understand some of the things that we're talking about while we're going over it. Again, it's important, you don't need to understand every bit of what we're doing. It's important to get your eyes on it, to practice yourself, to see it as much as you can. And it'll all just start to come together and click. So even if you're intimidated, it's okay. Tech is constantly intimidating. All that happens is you get more comfortable. You just get more comfortable being, out of your element or intimidated by what's going on. So, yeah. So I look forward to seeing everyone next Monday. Wednesday, I don't know what we'll be doing this Wednesday. I need to plan out something. We're close to the end of the Linux Zero to Hero series that we're running. So anyone who's new, Mondays we do something called the Crucible. We do coding stuff on Monday, and on Wednesday we do more of systems and cloud and DevOpsy things on Wednesday to kind of get the full scope of the technology and the tech stack. But yeah, so we'll be hopping into something like that on Wednesday. I'll figure that out. I'll send out some info on that. But yeah, I am done for the night. Again, hope you got something out of that. I posted the link to Node School up here. So again, that's nodeschool.io. Check out nodeschool.io, download the workshoppers, try out those, try out the different ones, see if you can kind of get through any of them. Maybe we'll do the Learn You Node one to kind of learn how to do some JavaScript on the back end. But yeah, so I got. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.